investing into preventing and responding to violence into women and girls is actually going to feed into a healthier society, more productive citizens. So by not protecting women from violence, we're basically feeding into an intergenerational and multi-sectoral cycle of violence. Prison is a university for criminality. And when it pertains to children who are in conflict with the law, it's a recipe to ensure that they will turn into criminals.
So many regulations to prevent child marriage, but still there are 21% of women are still under 18 years of age when they get married. Kids, they do not have the agency. They cannot decide what's good for them.
And you do not have the agency to say yes or no. Well, guess what? Any sexual activity without yes or no falls under the definition of child sexual abuse. As a human being, as a mother, I think the smallest coffins are the heaviest to carry.
I really find this very disturbing to think about this thing when there are in family cases when the child is asked which parent he wants to go with. So for a 8-year-old child, I think until 8 they stay with the mother, right? And after that,
I mean, we need to differentiate between what is advised as per several elements, the Islamic jurisprudence and psychosocial aspect of it, pedopsychosocial aspect of it. But again, the decision to let a child live with a mother or a father depends on must depend on the best interest of the child. And you have cases where a child is not safer with the mother. It's it really depends on objective elements and scenarios.
But by default, under the law in Pakistan,
no law is forcing you to let the child with the mother until 7. The law asks you to assess the best interest of the child.
Right. So
child protection laws are very clear. Family law ordinance as well.
So it's like the court will assess the situation that which parent is good for the child.
There is a difference between what they are doing, what is happening, and what the law says. But the law it's the welfare currently, as per family ordinance, is the welfare of the child. Right? Guardian and Wards Act is the welfare of the child.
So it's not like that by default mother gets the custody of the child.
If it is an abusive mother, if the child cannot safely remain in his or her best interest with the mother, then the child should not.
So court does assess all those things, and
the court should and must.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and that also depends on which particular judge there is,
of
and
course,
how they.
It depends on your it depends on your training, basically, on your capacity. That's why we are advocating for expertise-based adjudication.
Yeah, and on your personal choices as well. I mean, if you're a judge and if you've gone through a particular incident in your own case as well, you might tilt towards that.
Technically, you're not supposed to do it because of that. So that's what you're supposed to. Justice is supposed to be impartial. And that means technical, and that means you need to have objective elements in front of you, and you need to look at and consult the child as well. I think there is a difference between consulting the child and blindly doing what the child says. Do you get my point? It's an additional piece of information that you triangulate with other evidence and information, and that leads you to take a decision which is supposed to serve the best interest of the child. And then you're supposed to follow up on that decision and monitor it to see if it was the right decision, and in case it is not, adjust it.
Which is, I think, it's very unfortunate because there is no best way towards doing this, because kids, they do not have the agency. They cannot decide what's good for them, and in most of the cases, one parent can also influence more on the child, and they can make the kid say anything in the court.
But we need to be very careful with that when we say that, because you see, a child has as much agency as the one you allow him or her to have.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there is a difference between children's agency and children taking the decision. It's not the same thing. Okay. Consulting the child and taking the child's views into consideration is not synonymous with saying we're going to do only what the child says we must do. Do you understand what I mean? It's just not, and again, that's what I'm saying. It needs to be triangulated with different pieces of information. So for example, you have a child who says, I want to stay with mommy.
Yeah.
Okay, so
which is maybe most of the cases.
Which is maybe,
yeah.
and then that would give you an indication of the level of emotional attachment that the child has with regard to the mother.
Right.
Okay, and then what happens is that every time the child comes back from being with the mother, for example, there are traces of wounds.
Right.
All right, that's another element. So there is a problem with that type of custody, right? So you may need to therefore investigate that aspect. Talk to the mother. Maybe it's the mother, and talk to the child. What happened to you? How did it? These kind of things. And you're gonna guess. So maybe it's not the mother. Maybe it's the stepfather.
Yeah.
And the mother is not in the position to, protect the child. So then the decision would be to first you put the child into a safe environment, which could be giving the custody to someone else, and you support the mother maybe to get out of an abusive relationship. So you see, what I mean to say is that there is an entire technical assessment and protection measures that needs to be focused on family-based care and the best interest of the child.
Right.
But it's not a black and white decision, and it's not a one fits for all. It's always a very specific, complex, convoluted cases. I mean, child custody cases and child protection cases are one of the most complicated cases to address.
Right.
That's why you need highly qualified trained judges to do the job.
Right. And like you were mentioning earlier that we have some pilot child courts now.
Yeah.
To tell us a bit about that.
So it's an initiative which was actually triggered by the judiciary, the higher judiciary, the Lahore High Court, to be precise, in 2017. There were a few what they call child courts, which were family courts or even a child protection court in the Child Protection Welfare Bureau. But the concept of a child-sensitive court was not there. And so following series of, the reports, which really generated a public outcry related to an increase in the reported cases of child sexual abuse, etc., in Kasur, etc., the Lahore High Court called me and my team at that time and asked for technical support to conceptualize a child court. And the justice process that was going around it, because it's not only a space that you need a team, and you need SOPs, and you need technical ways to handle the case. So at that time, it was under the impetus of Honorable who's worked Chief Justice of Lahore High Court, Justice Syed Mansoor Shah. Mm-hmm. And so we really did, we presented what a model child court should be. And so what they piloted, so we did that, and what happened is that when we did a child court performance assessment afterwards, we realized that the feedback, you normally hear a terrible, sorry to say, but largely a terrible feedback related to clients' experience when they go to court. They say it's delayed, the judge was not nice, the lawyers were very aggressive, the police was this, the police was that. Normally the feedback is really bad.
Yeah.
When we collected the feedback of the clients there, the police officers who were around were saying, we feel that we're finally doing something for the children. The prosecutors were saying, finally, we have a decent space where we can actually protect the child, from further trauma, what we call secondary victimization. The lawyers were pretty decent because the space also, which was, full of colors and everything, very child sensitive, engages you to be child sensitive also, right? Okay. And then the trained judges were also presiding the court in a manner where the priority at each step of the process was really child-centric.
Yeah.
And so what happened is that we saw that all the chain of justice system actors felt much better, more relaxed to work into that environment. And the children and their families themselves, including accused children, were saying, we are treated with dignity and respect, and we feel much better. If only it had been like that since day one, since the beginning.
Right.
And so we documented that. And we also realized that because they were trained, because the procedure was presented, and because there was, for example, a video linkage, which was avoiding the child victim to be facing his abuser, alleged abuser, etc., we realized that indicators such as conviction rates increased. The bailout rate for accused children also increased. And one of the priority of children in conflict with the law is to focus on non-custodial measure, limit detention as much as possible. And so we presented those results at that time. Then since then, Honorable Justice Ed Motorisha had been appointed at the Supreme Court of Pakistan, and he said, well, we need to present it to the Chief Justice of Pakistan then, who's worked Justice Khosa. So we went there, and he was very interested because this was indigenous evidence, right? It was a pilot. It was not what someone from New York or Madrid or Timbuktu was talking about. It was about, Pakistani feedback and Pakistani experience.
And so this was done particularly in one district?
Initially in Lahore. It's still there. The
Right.
session court is still there.
Right.
And then based on that, then we did a presentation and we presented the feedback to the National Judicial Policy Making Committee,
Right.
which is where all the chief justices and prisoner judges and justices are sitting. And based on that feedback, they said, well, we need to upscale that and we need to further pilot it in other provinces as well. And that's how 12 pilot child courts were established and assessed over a span of 4 years, 3.5 years.
Right.
8 of those are in KP. And I must say the most successful models are from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The level of responsibility and understanding of the fact that this was critical to countering violence against children, including violence against girls, was, I would say, far more present in KP than anywhere else.
And these courts, do they just deal with the custody cases, or do they also include criminal cases?
Yeah,
and
criminal cases,
all range of
absolutely.
other
Yeah,
cases?
criminal cases.
Right.
I mean, it used to tackle cases of children in conflict with the law as well when children were accused of a crime. It's not the case anymore due to, in my view, unfortunate decision of Peshawar High Court. But anyways, this is the situation.
And sorry, so there are juvenile courts as well?
So what's happening
And
is
what's the difference between the two?
Okay, so you have child protection courts who caters to children who are child victims or witnesses of crimes. Okay, and that includes custody cases or whatever. But clearly, these are crimes, and that's what the child protection courts do in KP under the KP Child Protection Welfare Act. In Punjab, it's under the Punjab Destitute and Neglected Children Act. In Sindh, it's under the Sindh Child Protection Act. In ICT and in Balochistan, it's under the relevant Child Protection Acts, okay? But you also have the Juvenile Justice System Act 2018, where you are supposed to establish specific juvenile courts that are different from the other courts. The problem is that the law say may instead of saying shall, and that's the catastrophe, actually.
Okay.
Because that has been wrongly exploited by the decision makers. And instead of continuing to use a specific juvenile courts, one is there in Lahore, a specific one, and 2 in Karachi, in Malir and South Karachi. But instead of abiding by this notion of specific court, they have given what you call a blanket notification, and all additional district session judges are juvenile judges. So it unfortunately does not take into consideration the best interest of the child at that time.
Right.
It does not follow the may, why it's needed. And it also does not take into consideration the very good results that have been documented following those child court performance assessment. So I think that's an element that hopefully we can discuss further with the judiciary and the relevant law departments and human rights department. There is a new program now which is going to consolidate all the past example of good practices and capitalize upon the lessons learned related to justice for children, which is being initiated by UNICEF in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Law and Justice, the National Commission on Human Rights, and the Federal Judicial Academy. But it also touches upon, there are also other initiatives linked to, for example, GBV courts and GBV crimes, and all this is intersecting. And I think there is an increased reality of how you need special courts, not because it's fashionable, but because you need expertise-based justice processes for such cases. And that's essential to counter violence against women and girls and GBV in general.
So in terms of, if we have a better justice system in protecting the interests of the children, how do you see that, how it would impact the overall social dynamics, the economy, and the country overall?
So I think the case that we need to make here is to demonstrate why preventing, first of all, violence against children, and to some extent an efficient justice system serve that purpose, but also responding in a timely, adequate, gender and child-sensitive manner to avoid secondary victimization of children, enable them to be rehabilitated and to reunify them into family-based care environment, serve the purpose of a better economy, a more peaceful society, and therefore a cohesive country in general. All right. What happens is that research demonstrates that whenever you are a victim or witness of violence or abuse, your chances of perpetuating that cycle by being a victim or turning into an offender yourself is multifold. It's very high. It's exponential. So by not protecting girls, children, women from violence, we're basically feeding into an intergenerational and multi-sectoral cycle of violence.
Right.
It's a never-ending cycle, basically. And honestly speaking, when I'm talking about rehabilitation, I'm also thinking about the offender himself, okay? Often they are males, not always, but very often.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talk to police officers and they will tell you prison is a university for criminality.
Yeah.
All right. So we also need to think of, the retributive approach to justice is problematic. And when it pertains to children who are in conflict with the law, it's a recipe to ensure that they will turn into criminal instead of giving them an opportunity to reflect about what they have done, realize that it was wrong, and bring them back into a more healthy and sane path to be a constructive citizen. So there is a concept which is called childonomics, where you're basically demonstrating how investing into preventing and responding to violence into women and girls is actually going to feed into a healthier society, more productive citizens, and therefore having a skilled. I mean, for example, you experiencing or witnessing abuse and violence means that you have an exponential risk of having cognitive deficiencies, psychological trauma, what we call maladaptive coping skills, which can lead you to addiction, violence, depression or whatever. It's very difficult for such profile of people, of children, to learn.
Right.
To stay in school or whatever. So that means you will, and when you look at the endemic level of, that is experienced or witnessed by children, that means that you really have a significant section of your population who is going to suffer from that cognitive problems or that trauma, ill-addressed trauma, and who are going to shift to maladaptive coping skills. So the rational and cost-effective thing to do would be to invest into, first of all, preventive, because this is less costly than responding, prevention strategies, and then timely and adequate response so that you actually at some point break the cycle of violence to have that skilled, productive and healthy population and workforce who can use their mind, creativity and imagination to actually solve issues instead of creating them.
So it's also connected with all the other development areas we work on. So for example, this will control the out of school children, for example, because they would want to maybe stay in the schools, study longer. How do you see the intersectionality of it?
So if I give you an example with child marriage, all right. We know that when girls stay above 16 years of age in the education sector, then their chances of getting married before 18 are very low.
Right.
Because then they would want to go to higher education, etc., etc. If you have girls who marry much later, because very often Shadi Kebab am log bacio pe da, bacio pe da ora, etc., etc. This is how we see our family unit practices. You have a major demographic explosion in Pakistan, right? Which also feeds poverty, which feeds tensions, and which therefore feeds, again, maladaptive coping skills. You have a huge family, you don't know what to do, so you're going to have to send your children into labor.
Yeah.
When children are into labor, they are in heightened risk of being abused and exploited. All right? So you see, from child labor, SDG addressing child labor, you link it also child marriage, you link it also to child abuse. So there are all those multi-sectoral approach. Preventing an abuse such as child marriage means and ensuring that girls access education for a longer term also means that your population is going to decrease. Maybe you will gain 5 years of girls who will not produce babies at that time, and that will have a significant impact into your population. Also, because they will be equipped and educated, their reproductive health will be better.
Yeah.
So you will probably have a significant decrease into infant mortality, maternal health, better maternal health care, all these elements. And then when girls can, along with, let's say as partners, let's say when you work, if you are two to be able to generate an income, you may also, be able to look better after your family. And again, financial stress is one of the main triggers in terms of domestic violence, for example, or GBV. I'm not saying it's the only one. I'm saying it's a very important one. So, and these are just examples among many others, or our things feed into another. Why we call it a multi-sectoral, multi-dimensional adverse effects of child marriage. Child marriage basically puts boys, when it's a boy, but most of the time it's girls, at a heightened risk of abuse. It's a form of sexual abuse as well, and commercial exploitation, right?
Yeah.
You're not ready. Your body is not ready to do that, and you do not have the agency to say yes or no. Well, guess what? Any sexual activity without yes or no, as per PPC, falls under the definition of child sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And when there is any intercourse, this falls under the definition of rape. When the child is less than 16. This is not me saying it. This is the Pakistan Penal Code. This is a legal reality.
Yeah.
So we need to realize that by not addressing harmful practices, and those harmful practices have been labeled so by the Organization of Islamic Conference, by even the Council of Islamic Ideology, which has acknowledged that child marriage is a problem, is harmful, health issues, fistula, all those things. And it costs so much money to the state.
How prevalent child marriage is in Pakistan?
So as per the latest PDHA statistics that are 2017 and 18, 21% of girls in Pakistan are married under 18.
21%?
Yeah. So that means you have close to 2 million. So you've done better. In the last year, there is an improvement. Okay, so that's the encouraging part. It means that we need to pursue our efforts. It's not a lost cause, all right, because there has been a decrease. However, 2 million is still too much.
Yeah, and there are different regulations in each provinces, and the minimum age for girls for marriage is different in Sindh and in KPK.
Yeah, so all over Pakistan, except in Sindh. Sindh, you cannot. As per law, you cannot marry before 18 years of age for boys and girls. In all the other provinces, it's 18 for a boy and 16 for a girl.
Right.
However, as per the latest Lahore High Court order, the government of Punjab is supposed to legislate and increase the minimum age of girls to 18 as well. Otherwise, in its current state, it violates Article 25A of the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, which says that there shall be no discrimination on the basis of sex.
Right.
So you cannot say it's okay to get married to 18 if you're a boy and 16 if you're a girl.
Yeah.
Secondly, the Federal Sharia Court has very clearly explained that there was no bar in Islam in putting a minimum age of marriage.
Right.
For girls or for boys. So you can do it. That's not an issue. It's a matter of political responsibility. And it's high time that not only the Punjab government, but all the provincial governments are acting upon this. But it's not only an age for marriage issue. It's also about, the marriage process per se.
Yeah.
In our country, many marriages are solemnized and not registered.
Right.
All right. So you also need to ensure that, as per law, no solemnization. It's not sufficient to focus only on the registration, but solemnization should not happen until and unless a CNIC is being attesting that both parties are less than 18 is being presented to the Nikahwan.
Right.
Okay. And there should be a duty for the Nikahwan to give the SCNIC, not of the father, of the mother, but of the children. And that leads us to another main SDG issue and fundamental child and women rights issue, which is the right to identity, acknowledged by a groundbreaking decision of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, which explained that right to identity falls under the notion of right to dignity, which is enshrined in our constitution. Okay, you have a fundamental right to exist. Aapka pehchan bunyati hakook hai aapka. And so especially as per Islamic jurisprudence, when you look at her inheritance law or whatever, this is a major aspect.
Yeah.
And so we need also to focus on boosting civil registration, birth registration, marriage registration, death registration. All this is essential to access public services, to access a job, but also to ensure that you can boost I would say, legal and gender and child sensitive solemnization and eventually registration of marriage, basically.
Right. And how do you see the effects of child marriage on the health of those kids?
But child marriage is catastrophic for children. So I would say for the child bride, but also for the children who come from that marriage. Okay, you have, imagine, 50% more chances of a child bride to be anemic if she conceives before 20 years of age. For a child, the child of the bride, there are 50% more chances of a baby to be stillborn when the mother conceives before 20 years of age. I mean, from a statistical perspective, this is mind-blowing. And then there is a mega exponential risk of child brides to suffer from fistula. Fistula means, you can't control your muscle anymore, and you can imagine. And it's so... why would you, which creates such a heavy burden for public health authorities and for hospitals, and which really impede, women and those child brides to function. And then I'm sorry to say, but as a human being, as a mother, I think the smallest coffins are the heaviest to carry.
Yeah. That's really sad.
You got disturbed by what I've just said. It's the reality, but I think I think that's why the theme of this campaign this year, invest into ending violence against women and girls. That's why it's so important. When we say investing, it's because by describing to you all those multidimensional consequences, all right, adverse impact. And when we're talking health, it's also mental health. It's not only physical health, right? And all those dysfunctioning. Also, when you marry early, let's be clear, you're asking your child to look after a child.
Yeah.
What kind of parenting do you expect from that? Yeah. Okay. So that means that you should also, certainly prevent the child marriage from happening in the first place. Try to respond from a legal perspective, but also from a social and a health perspective. How can you support young mothers, afterwards, and the babies and the children? You also have a heightened risk of that child who's been conceived by the young bride to be abused because she's not equipped to deal with that. And so when we say investing, it means you need to ensure that there is relevant resource allocation to prevent violence against women and girls, because I've just described to you the multiple consequences of it. Okay, it's an economic disaster because you have a workforce which is not skilled, equipped, mentally able to do so. Because you're having an entire part of the population which is, again, unskilled, not empowered to be part of the society in a productive manner. And so why would the investors come to your country? How do you want to run business if you don't have qualified workforce? Okay. Secondly, it also creates an intergenerational cycle of, violence, which is again counterproductive, which is harming your stability, your security situation locally. And so when we say invest, it means you need to allocate the relevant resources to prevent that from happening in the first place, and then to respond in a timely and adequate manner.
Yeah.
And to do that, you need human as well as technical, as well as financial resources. And that investment must cover all this. So that's where childonomics comes in, where you need to make a comparative analysis. How much does it cost the state to do nothing or to not do enough? And how much does it cost to actually invest in a strategic manner through adequate technical, human, and financial resources to actually prevent and respond to this? What will be the return, the social and economic and political dividend of that investment?
Yeah.
That's and the human dividend of it. What you call, will it enable you further to what the Vision 25 of Pakistan defines as harnessing human capital? If you want to do that, you need to take care of your human capital. To harness its potential, take care of that capital.
And how do you think, how it directly impacts the skill development in the country?
It's a catastrophe. Again, as I said, if you're not educated, if you're not mentally stable, if you're not allowed to move, or to access those training structures, vocational structure, educational structure, if you don't feel safe in those structures, that means you will not have access to that, to those skills. And therefore, you cannot be part of that productive workforce. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And when I'm saying, I just want also to be very clear that it's not only about, when I'm saying productive workforce, you can be part of the productive workforce by staying home. Home-based work is an option.
Yeah.
So there are solutions. We just need to devise the solution with not only the law and policy makers, but also with community members and with local government authorities.
And in the context of child marriage, again, despite you mentioned that there are so many regulations to prevent child marriage, but still there are 21% of women are still under 18 years of age when they get married. So is there any initiatives at government level going on to raise awareness on this?
Yeah, so there is, so for example, UNFPA and UNICEF are jointly working with provincial governments and territorial governments as well to do several things. Raise awareness, because you need the behavioral change and you need to inform and sensitize people. So very often they think they're doing the right thing by marrying the children early, you see? So there is also a realization process that needs to be there.
Yeah.
You also need to hold the abusers accountable, because let's be also very clear. I'm not talking about teenagers to teenagers child marriage. It's a different story. But when you have a male adult marrying a young girl, it's an excuse for institutionalizing pedocriminality.
Right.
And I stand by it, and I'm very, because I see it. Okay, any decent male above 18 would not consider marrying a young girl if healthy boundaries are put in place. And so by doing that, I think the law exists. But the enforcement of that law is defective by lack of awareness, but also by fear of reprisal. Let's be very clear.
Yeah.
Many judicial officers told me, how do you want to hold these people accountable? For example, the Nicaragua, the RECA registrar, when you have a group of people outside your court who are just there and threatening you.
Right.
And that's...
And also a lot of people in the law enforcement agencies as well,
yeah.
They wouldn't believe in this system as well, because they might be part of the problem as well.
But even when they don't, I've seen both, to be honest. Yeah. I actually have seen a lot of police officers who were really collaborative and cooperative with that. But currently, the Child Marriage Restraint Act does not give police cognizance to take that case up. It needs to be reported. A complaint needs to be filed by the family member to the union council. So from a legal perspective, apart from increasing the minimum age of marriage to 18 for both boys and girls, you also need to ensure that the solemnization includes the obligation to present a CNIC, You need to have an age determination protocol in case the age is disputed. And you need also to ensure that the complaint mechanism, the first FIR registration, needs to be possible through child protection units or through the police station, for example. And that's where, having a more gender-sensitive police is important. That's where enforcing what we call case management and referral system, child protection case management and referral system is important, because if a child protection unit at district level is informed that there is a case, they can go to the police, and then the police can go with the child protection officer trying to prevent it. Actually, to be honest, the law is defective right now. But what has been done in many cases, including in Khyber-Pakhtunkhwa, for example, but in Sindh as well, they have used the child protection laws, saying child marriage means risk of child sexual abuse, means risk of the child being abused. So we are, under the child protection laws, we have legitimacy and jurisdiction to take cognizance of that risk, of that potential offense, and we can intervene. And there have been many cases of child marriage that have been prevented in Khyber-Pakhtunkhwa because the child protection authorities were informed, went with the police, talked to the families, and the families, therefore, by being sensitized and everything, agreed to delay the marriage. And then it was followed up, and it didn't happen. And I think that's the right way to go. Initially, we don't need to immediately go through, a very we need to use the community policy healthy approach first. And then if after being given that first warning, it's not happening, then, the full force of the law should apply to parents who are basically violating the law.
Right. And by that, do you mean that there can be chances that we might be lenient towards parents currently, and the law could be
I don't call it leniency. I think it needs to follow what you call child protection, family-based care approach. They are parents and they are other abusers who need to be held accountable through the law. But I think there is also an entire dimension of child marriage happening just because families feel desperate, because they are socioeconomically deprived. And in such cases, the first answer should be family-based support.
Right.
And then in a monitored manner. And then if they don't, if with the support, they're still, at risk of abusing the child, then they should definitely be held accountable under criminal law. I'm talking about the parents or the guardians, right? When it is, again, someone else who is kidnapping or whatever a child, that's an entire story, and that's pedocriminality, and that's it.
But currently, do we have such judgments in place where parents or the guardians, they were penalized for, arranging any child marriages?
The parents, I don't know. I think there might be a few at lower courts level, yes. But other than the parents, definitely, yes, there are. And there are also legally binding jurisprudence from the Islamabad High Court, for example. Honorable Justice Babar Sattar gave a very good legally binding decision on that front. There are a few cases also at district session court level, but not enough really. But again, holding people accountable by the law does not necessarily mean that other than abusers, but when it pertains to family members, socioeconomically deprived parents, I think there is a serious need to first apply family support strategies in the context of child protection framework and case management and referral system. And then if it doesn't work, then you definitely hold those parents accountable.
So this also reminds me of this, although not directly connected to child marriage, the law of marital rape.
Yeah.
Where I was reading somewhere that in Sindh particularly, there has been cases where the court has given some rulings as well.
Yeah.
So any idea about that, what the law is and how it is enforced? Because I understand in some of the countries, there are severe punishments for marital rape.
For rape in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
And marital rape in particular, because I think in Pakistan's context, it's also a matter of lack of awareness that a lot of people don't know that any such law exists.
Rape under Pakistani law is a crime.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to rape people. whoever they are.
And so how frequently this is being enforced, and like any idea?
Against husband, I think it would be currently very difficult. You have and it's not only in Pakistan, right? Marital rape is one of the very, I don't think it should be controversial, because I don't think Islam allows rape or Christianity or whatever at any stage. But the mindset here is very important. And again, it takes time, and that's why you need to train and sensitize prosecutors, lawyers, general public, and judges as well.
Yeah. And a lot of times I see like many organizations, they hold these trainings for the law enforcement agencies as well. And particularly, I think regarding gender-based violence, I'm aware of some of the training programs that were held in Balochistan, in KPK. So how much do you think like that's effective in terms of like how much you can learn in 2 days, 3 days training?
Agreed. So it really depends on who is doing it and how, first. But I think, and it also depends, I don't believe in trainings, I believe in capacity building development programs. And that's a very different thing. Training is only part of that. But if you look at the Federal Judicial Academy, not only the Federal Judicial Academy, the judicial academies, especially, but to some extent the police academies as well. I'll take the example of the judicial academies because I think they are the ones who are the most thorough in that regard. They do training need assessment, and then based on the training need assessment, they develop, maybe if it is with the support of a technical agency, that's a different topic, or technical expert, but they do training need assessment, then a curriculum is developed, it's being pre-tested, then it's being reviewed, adjusted, and then they go through training and refreshers, and then they adjust the component of the training, etc., and they try to also approach that training through different angle. One day maybe it will be the law, on another time it will be processes, on the third time it might be just forensic communication. So they're trying to be as comprehensive, and they're far more open to creativity as well. The problem is that there is too much turnover. And again, as I said, there is a structural and systemic issue here, not only in the judiciary, it's the same in the police, in the bureaucracy, even when you look at, to some extent, civil society. You lack the realization that you need expertise-based teams, and that even when you have a rotation, the rotation needs to be articulated around people who are experts. You cannot be a jack of all source, right, of all trades. It's not possible. And so such cases of GBV or violence against women and girls should be only and exclusively dealt with experts in their field. For example, I don't know anything about corporate law, and I would never agree to have a podcast on corporate law because it's not my topic. That should be the cases, the same thing for judges, lawyers, prosecutors, social service workforce, etc., and they need to follow what you call continuous professional development. So that also means that you need to have the very same type of high-level teaching and curriculum at a university level within academia. It's currently not the case. It's I'm not the one saying it. The Supreme Court and even highest legal fraternity representative, have highlighted the challenges with the quality of training in the law universities. Even the best ones. There are serious question marks. That's something that needs to be addressed, right? So for that, you need to have further curriculum review, revamping, and again, it's an evolving topic. So it needs to be revised and updated regularly. Field of law, imagine the case law, the jurisprudence comes regularly. So that's something that needs to be very much dynamic. I think there is an increasing realization of that need. The legal fraternity and the Supreme Court of Pakistan are working on that. I think at the government level, that's far from insufficient at the government level, and that needs to be addressed.
In terms of awareness, again, are there like educational interventions at the schools level? Is there like any collaboration with the education departments? Because like I always wonder why don't we have like these basic this basic knowledge and awareness given to the students at an earlier age. So are there like any interventions going on?
So it's very ad hoc. Honestly speaking, it's very ad hoc. It's not systemized every time. And I think it's a global issue as well. Revamping the education curricula are always extremely controversial. My experience is that there are many people who are in the education department who should not be there, who have no relevant expertise to be there. It's appalling.
Yeah.
And I mean it, really. So again, in order to provide education, you need to have educationists. You need to have experts. And then you can certainly have, cross-expertise, right? To develop a curriculum, a scientist, a biologist, a physician,
Absolutely.
a gender specialist, a pedopsychiatrist, but so expertise by teams who need to be the ones doing the curriculum. There has been attempt, not up to the mark at all. And secondly, and instead of an ad hoc approach, it needs to be, there have been serious efforts to have what you call education blueprint or policy or roadmaps. That needs to be part of the curriculum with the relevant technical expert. But again, it's part of this invest into preventing. How do you investing also means that you include that into the curriculum.
Yeah.
Means you also give the resource allocation to have enough schools, enough trained teachers, monitor teachers, print enough books, the material to be there. And not only the books, we are 2024, the video equipment, the internet equipment, how do you link that? And then the entire life skills-based education approach, all right? Giving that exposure to children, to schools and everything. It's not that the government is not doing it, but it's not done in a serious, structured, organized and cohesive manner. They lack vision, and the people who are in charge of reviewing the curriculum don't have the capacity and the competence to do it.
That is so
ready
true.
to face them. I stand by my statement.
I've worked with the education sector, and I'm aware like how complicated things are to get embedded in the curriculum.
And start by having the right technical team.
Yeah.
That's really basic. Get a local technical team, but with competent people.
Yeah.
It's awful. And have games and the kind of slogans and contents and that you hear that are being vehicled by the teachers it's appalling. And equip the teachers to do it, which means again in the universities also train your curriculum so that you have trained teachers who are actually pedagogues.
Yeah,
I can be very talented and very competent in physics and be a terrible teacher.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
that's a different skill set.
Exactly. It's a different skill set and everything. So that's what we also need to keep in mind. How do you make a child feel like learning, And that's where your issue of, when you talk about violence against women and girls, corporal punishment in school is critical. Yes. I mean, you every time I give a training, when I want to sensitize people on child protection, every time I talk to adults, when I ask them, I have this session where I ask them, to share a good memory and a bad memory of their childhood. Whenever we touch the topic of bad memory, 99% of the time, corporal punishment in school when I was a child comes up.
Yeah.
It's traumatic. It takes you away from education. It does not mobilize your learning ability, your cognitive power.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the main reasons for a school dropout, corporal punishment.
Corporal punishment, and I think like in some cases also I remember like reading some of the statistics that we had for dropout ratios. There would be like a sudden dip after the grade 8th in girls enrollment.
Yeah.
And so that's probably like one of the factors was like child marriage perhaps.
Child marriage, but again, what kind of opportunities and alternative are you proposing? So again, safe access to the higher schools who are very often more limited and therefore further with no facility to go there. You also need to take into consideration reproductive health. Girls menstruate and you're having white uniforms to go to schools with no washrooms. I mean, these are gender insensitive realities that are simply, really problematic, in addition to safe transports and to sensitization and of the community people so that girls are not harassed on the way, when they go. These kind of things, they do matter. I mean, as a parent, you don't want that to happen to your teenage girl, of course.
Yeah.
And then once you go to school, all right, that's why you need to think in investing into that form of prevention. It also means that you will invest into how can you, what do you call that? Foster opportunities for youth. Because I'm looking at these calls for, recruitment, for example, and you have so many people with a master who apply. You start interviewing them. They're not up to the task. They're not up to the level of what they should be with a master. Why? Because, the teachers were not up to the mark, because the curriculum was not up to the mark, because, so many reasons, because they had too many students, because they were not equipped to do it in the right manner. So it's all those elements, and that's part of the investment that needs to be there for it not to happen.
Yeah.
I think another aspect also of ensuring that violence against women and girls is, and that there is relevant investment, is ensuring that women are represented adequately in the justice sector. We need more women judges at all levels of the justice sector, which means session court, high court, Supreme Court, but also in the police, in the legal fraternity. And that means you need to follow prosecution, social welfare, medical legal officers. It's a big issue. We don't have enough women there. And not only women, mostly women, but also non-binary people. Yeah. And because especially in Pakistani gender framework, if I'm a woman, I want to talk to another woman. I don't want to tell what happened to me to a male. And actually many male
I think specifically when it involves a gender-based violence issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, many men feel more comfortable disclosing it to a woman as well.
Yeah.
So even that. Yeah. But especially when you are a woman or when you are a child. So that's also an investment which needs to be made, because in order for those women not only to access, but then to be retained and to advance, to be promoted, you need what you call affirmative action, which means you need to make sure that they will be safe, that there will be a redressal mechanism in case of potential sexual harassment or discrimination whatsoever, and also maybe having a community-based, nursing care centers, because maybe they don't want to bring the children to work, or having daycare in their work. I don't know. This needs to be discussed with them, and they will tell you what they need.
More gender inclusive, all these
gender inclusive, gender and disability inclusive. What about people with disability, women with disability? And children, girls and women with disability are at least three times more likely to experience violence than other women and girls, and that's something we need to take into consideration.
So what do you think, what should be the way forward towards addressing all these issues?
I think countering violence against women and girls is possible. I mean, by the way, without falling into the trap of inappropriate comparison, but if you look at acid violence, Pakistan between 2014 and 20 managed to reduce acid attacks by 85%. So, it's possible, all right? Yeah. It might take longer time, because this was a micro phenomenon in terms of GBV, and it might be far more complicated, but reducing it is definitely something which is realistic. So I think when you, first of all, invest into creating, and that's where the men and boys engaged approach is very necessary, creating male citizens who are secure in their masculinity and who understand that being a man is not synonymous with being abusive. That is already a very sustainable and cost-effective investment. And I'm telling you that as a mother who raised two boys. Number one. Secondly, I think if you also realize that ending violence against women and girls needs to be considered a national priority, a security matter. That's what representative from IPRI, Islamabad Policy Research Institute, were saying. And they were retired security forces representatives. So I thought they had that very interesting insight, you know. Because of the intergenerational cycle of violence I described to you earlier, because of how it does impact social cohesion and fosters violence, etc., And because of the need we have in order to have an attractive economy and capitalize upon the population of our skills of our population, basically we need to consider it a national priority. And to do that, you need to invest adequately. Who would not invest into a national priority? Right now, it's probably one of the lowest priority on the national agenda, and that's a huge strategic mistake. It's short-sighted, ill-informed, really.
Do you think it's also not just the government or law enforcement agencies who are responsible to bring that change, but communities themselves, they also need to sort of realize there needs to be more awareness so that,
that's where media, that's where people like you have an essential role to play. I think the state overall in its dichotomy certainly has the foremost responsibility to do it. But then the state is also made of people, of citizens. And that's where the community work comes first. And that needs to engage with youth, with women, with children, with religious leaders of all faith, with media, with academia. It's really a holistic, multi-sectoral investment and approach that needs to be put forward.
That's actually a lot of learning for me today.
I know it's a lot of jargon, right? But it's really about having the right laws, having the right, again, financial, human, and technical resources to enforce those laws, having the right media and curriculum and community-based mobilization so that muhala level takna, you actually get the message there. And that means that when there is need for social protection and social support, it's there. And accountability mechanism. You have in Pakistan the National Commission on Human Rights.
Yes.
It's being Gangri accredited, A plus, and I think this kind of redressal mechanism, but also really community-based people, men who would say, for God's sake, this is unacceptable. What are you doing? You need that. And it's going to take time. I don't think it's going to happen in 24 hours, clearly.
Absolutely. It reminds me of one of the documentaries that we were developing for Umar Asghar Khan Foundation, where this person who we were interviewing, after attending a training on gender-based violence, he had this realization that he was being violent in his own family as well. And we prepared this documentary, and by the time we released it, he had actually passed away. He had some health issues as well. But it was really interesting to know that, by just receiving that message and, being in that atmosphere where he understood that whatever he was doing was wrong, and then he was able to change as well. So that can be done. So I think it's a constant effort.
It's what we call a gender transformative process, right? And I've seen that happening a lot, by the way, especially if you don't attack people, but engage. Do it through a dialogue. I know we love polarizing things. I think we really need a peaceful way to tackle that. We need to also promote alternative model. Okay, you think that you're a male because you're abusive? Look at this one. He's very much a male, but his family is happy and healthy because it's happening differently. Can we look how they function? There is another story that could be told. So I think presenting that story and discussing over it and having your male champion along with, women and the girls' agency is definitely essential. But I believe there is a way around it. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you if I didn't.
Thank you so much for your time and energy. It was really interesting to listen to all of these ideas, and I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, thank you so much.